Good evening. I think we have all of our audio and video issues at rest now. So first of all, I'd like to welcome you to the second annual ANSER Symposium. The Argonne Northwestern Solar Energy Research Center got started 2 years ago and is off to the races, as they say, having been designated just last week as one of DOE's new Energy Frontier Research Centers. Yeah. We're absolutely delighted with that development, and it really bodes well for the future of not only our enterprise, but the entire renewable energy enterprise within our country, because we now have the resources and the impetus to really go out and address this problem in the way it ought to be addressed. And that's essentially to solve it. I'm particularly pleased tonight to introduce Professor Harry Gray from Caltech. Harry is an alumnus of Northwestern University, and which we're quite proud of. And Harry is one of those people who is a chemist and a scientist of wide repute and wide notoriety, so much so that in the community, he's one of those individuals who doesn't need a last name. In fact, whenever we have an event or a conference, all one has to say is Harry's going to be there, and everybody knows exactly who we mean. So I'm really delighted to introduce him tonight, and to really pleased that he was able to take time from his busy schedule to be our keynote speaker at this symposium. Harry, as I mentioned, is really one of the principal scientists in this field, and has been for a long period of time. He has really been a pioneer in studying electron transfer and charge movement in systems as diverse as proteins, inorganic complexes, organometallic complexes. He's also been in the forefront of developing catalysts in this field. The breadth of his portfolio is truly amazing. And as such, he provides us with inspiration and with many delightful directions with which to pursue this important work. He's been recognized for his work over the years by numerous awards, much too numerous to mention in any detail. They are all listed in the program. I just want to point out he's won major awards from the American Chemical Society, the Priestley Medal. He's won the Wolf Foundation Prize. He's also been awarded the National Medal of Science by President Reagan back in 1986, and is a member of the National Academy and other academies worldwide as well. So with that, let me just hand the microphone over to him. Harry tonight is going to tell us about how to power the planet with solar fuels. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Mike. Is my mic on? Is it working, Gary? Okay, good. Delighted to be back on campus. It's changed a little since I was here. We had a great football team when I was here. And one year we beat Michigan, Notre Dame, and Ohio State in the same year. I noticed you beat Michigan, but Ohio State was a bit more of a problem. We had a great coach named Ara Parsegian, and after we beat Notre Dame 3 years in a row, Notre Dame, of course, hired him. And this has annoyed me for a long time, and I had to get it off my chest again tonight. So if there are any Notre Dame people here, please leave now. Okay, you can stay. You're not? Okay, good. All right, I'm pleased to be here, and I'm absolutely delighted, Mike, with this new grant that's come to Northwestern Argonne and your consortium, and other awards made like this recently across the country. I think it bodes well for our field. It's wonderful that people in our field are now getting the support They really deserve to work on probably the most important problem facing our planet, which is the conversion of sunlight to useful energy, which is what I'm going to talk about tonight. And tomorrow there's a wonderful program starring many of the folks who are here tonight who are going to tell you about their really terrific work in this area, and I will touch upon maybe 2 or 3 of those tonight in my lecture. I've got a remote here, which I hope will work because I don't like to stand behind a podium. It's not my style. Very often I look around the audience, and if I see somebody that piques my interest in one way or another, I usually run up in the crowd, and that's why I need my remote. By the way, you can stop me anytime during this talk if you have a question. I may not recognize you. But you can stop me if you yell out, and we can talk about it. At the end, of course, Tom, we can have a discussion. Well, this is where I work, the Beckman Institute. This is my sculpture. If this work doesn't, my research doesn't work, I can make money selling sculptures. This is a sculpture of mine I did some time ago in cardboard. But it's a structure of the iron storage protein, ferritin, the protein that stores most of the iron in our bodies. It has a beautiful symmetrical shape, so I thought I'd make a sculpture out of it. Bill Schaefer and I built it in cardboard. We couldn't get any money to do it properly in granite, so we took the cardboard model over to the president's office at Caltech, and we started pouring water in his office over the cardboard model to show how beautifully the water flowed across the faces of this sculpture. His name was Murph Goldberger, and Murph said, "Harry, stop, I'll give you the money." And so this is one way to raise money, is to flood the president's office. The vice president for research is here. I suggest you not. Maybe we won't do that. I think you'll just turn loose of the money right away. Okay, let's get going. We've got the sun. It's our greatest resource. It is the only resource that we have that supplies enough energy reaching this planet that we can use for the future. Nothing else is really competitive with it. We know that in about 1 hour, the sun shines. There are enough photons that come through the ozone layer, enough energy involved in those photons to power the planet for a year if we really could figure out how to convert it. So the first principle is there, that is, we have enough sunlight to solve this problem. And as I like to say, when I'm talking about solar energy conversion, I really like my nuclear power plant 93 million miles away. That's a really good spot for it. And that's where it is. So, a short course in solar energy conversion. There are 3 things you should remember. 1, you should try to capture all the light that reaches the Earth's surface filtered by the ozone layer. If you just do that with a black body, you make heat. From heat, you can make steam. From water, from steam, you can make electricity. And there's now very, very good technologies of big solar power towers that we could put in the desert with mirrors and lenses to do solar to electric conversion through heat generation. And this, I think, will be used more and more as time goes on. The next step is not just degrading it to heat, but in fact to interface it with a semiconductor, and the semiconductor now of choice is silicon. You can buy silicon photovoltaic cells with 30-year guarantees and generate electricity at least 10% efficiency, maybe more, sometimes 20% with the right silicon. And these are now available, and the technology is here. And if we had any sense, we would be building solar power plants all across the country, putting people to work, because most of the cost in this is actually installation, and we've got lots of people in this country out of work. We could put them to work building silicon photovoltaic power stations right now, and this would be a step in the right direction. We are building a number of those around the country now, and we should build more. And then, of course, that's what this step is. The second step involves electron transfer, which Mike mentioned. This is called quantum solar conversion, the capture of light, the excitation in band gaps, electron hole separation, and using those electrons to make electricity. This is the second step in solar conversion. The third and final step, which we're all trying to achieve, is not just to make electricity, which you have to use when the sun is shining, but to make fuel. The big challenge is to make fuel by combining these electrons and holes generated in semiconductor-like devices with catalysts that will shuffle around chemical bonds so that we can take the holes and oxidize water to oxygen, extract the electrons and protons from water, and then put them back together with catalysts to make hydrogen fuel. That is the water splitting problem, which involves all three of these fundamental steps. There's important work in all of these areas: light capture, electron transfer, and catalysis. Mike mentioned that in the introduction. Lots of fundamental work is going on around the world in these areas, and it's our hope for the future that we'll be able to, in fact, split water efficiently with sunlight. Then we'll have fuel, and then when the sun isn't shining, we can use fuel cells to make electricity as need be. But right now, even with silicon, we could make enough electricity to run the United States if we covered enough land with silicon, and that amount of land is shown on this slide. I picked out this to illustrate two or three principles. One is it's doable. This amount of, this number of square miles, this 1.7% of the US land area, is what it would take now at 10% silicon to run the United States with solar energy. I picked this out because nobody lives here. Or very few people live there, and if you do, hold up your hand now, and I'll take your names and we'll move you to Beverly Hills. Okay, sign up and you'll be moved to Beverly Hills very shortly. Well, seriously, we're not going to do this. I just want to show you it's doable, and of course, what we're really going to do is cover wasted spaces that are in airport parking lots. If you've ever seen the parking lot at Los Angeles Airport, it's enormous. If we simply covered this parking lot with a silicon roof to build a solar power station, we would have a plant that would rival nuclear plants in terms of power output. And I'm sure O'Hare has a big parking lot as well. Shopping malls. All of these spaces that are available to us now, we should start refitting with known photovoltaic technology now, putting people to work and taking the power load off, while those of us who are in the research business are working hard to build systems that we can scale up to solve this problem in the long term. And so the usual objection is that silicon costs too much. Single crystal silicon is very expensive, it costs too much. And so there is a worldwide effort to make cheap solar cells. There's a lot of great work going on here at Northwestern and Argonne, and these groups that have just received this nice grant. Now it's time to make some good organic photovoltaics. Mike and Tobin, you've got the money now. Get to work. I'm counting on you. Most people around the world are trying to exploit dye-sensitized solar cells to make cheap solar cells. The idea is just to take white paint, which is cheap as dirt, titanium dioxide, which you can see going around the world in these big DuPont tank cars, to take white paint, which of course won't absorb any sunlight, and put a dye on it that will absorb sunlight and inject electrons into the conduction band of TiO2 to make electricity. And the most studied system is ruthenium-2 dyes on TiO2 to make what we might call solar paint. These ruthenium dyes developed first by Michael Gretzel. This was the best one, or the most studied one, the so-called N3 dye of Gretzel, which has this formula. It looks like this in slides. So we make these slides in our laboratory, Nate Lewis's lab and my lab at Caltech. We make these slides, we get them working, and then we look at the cell kinetics, the fundamental things of cells that actually work. These absorb this amount of sunlight, leaving this open so they can be obviously improved. But what we have studied, along with Jim McCusker at Michigan State, who's collaborated with us, is we've studied the fundamental injection rates from these excited states into the conduction band of TiO2. This is a very, very fast process in the femtosecond range. Usually it's extremely efficient. And so the problem is these energy wasting reactions to the iodide-triiodide couple or the back reaction to ruthenium-3. We have studied this reaction fundamentally at Caltech by transient absorption, watching an electron move from TiO2 back into ruthenium-3. And in a series of dyes, we've shown that this back reaction, this energy wasting reaction, actually follows something that's known as the Marcus inverted effect. The bigger the energy gap, the slower the rate. And this has allowed us to actually design some new dye-sensitized solar cells that don't have to run on the iodide-triiodide couple. The ruthenium generated here is so oxidizing, we can actually use poor donors to increase the open circuit voltage of these cells. And our big advance was done by Libby Mayo, working with Lewis and myself. She was actually able to build a cyanide ruthenium solar cell that moved the open circuit voltage from the iodide thing here way out about half a volt higher, which literally doubled the efficiency of this dye-sensitized cell. So this is one of our main things that we've done is to build more efficient, more robust solar cells working on bromide and bromine. But in the long run, we're not going to be able to use ruthenium, I don't think, in any kind of dye-sensitized solar cell scenario. It's going to be some kind of organic photovoltaic, I believe, something earth abundant, something that can be scaled up, something that can be processed better, and so forth. And for this, we are using dyes called corolles on TiO2 that can do syntheses, can be scaled up, and whose metals in the middle are earth-abundant materials like gallium and aluminum. And the theme of this talk is really for us to get to the point where we can incorporate earth-abundant materials. So if the scale-up comes and we have systems to build big, large systems, we won't run out of material. The second theme is we have to build them out of non-toxic materials. The cost is often discussed as a showstopper, but it isn't for the kinds of materials we need. The real showstopper is earth abundance or not. And so these are molecules we can make. Zev Gross at the Technion, my collaborator in Israel, a longtime collaborator, worked out ways of making this framework similar to porphyrins in gram quantities. And in my lab, we can make grams of this material in a few days. Before Gross's work, it would take years to make a few milligrams of this kind of structure. This is a porphyrin-like structure, but it's contracted. And the materials are better than porphyrins for these applications. We sulfonate these positions and attach them to TiO2 to make Coroll Don Walker and my group to make Corot sensitized solar cells. And the big winner is gallium. Gallium and aluminum are the two winners in this, and we've been able to make dye-sensitized solar cells with these materials. And here's a whole that we call gallium solar paint that have these colors. All of these have been tested cells, and they're all competitive with the best ruthenium dye-sensitized cells, but they're out of earth-abundant materials, organic materials with gallium in them. This basic framework. The colors are tuned by substituting along this periphery, but you could, if you don't like your house painted with solar paint, if it's an ugly red-brown color of ruthenium, you can get one of my blues or greens. And since the big problem in this field is stability, over the you can get a 30-year guarantee on a silicon solar cell. I'm willing to give you a 2-day guarantee on these. Because to make the very important point that the enormous challenge we face in this field is not only to build things that are efficient, to build them that are robust, and they will last and last and last, because these are not living systems that can regenerate themselves the way plants do, but they're inorganic type and organic type systems that we'll have to build so that they will last. And this is a huge problem in this field for any kind of material that has an organic framework. But it's a challenge, and we will ultimately solve that, we being all the folks in the world who are working on this problem. So we have working gallium TiO2 cells that are doing quite well in terms of efficiency. We need to scale them up, and we need to make them more robust, but we have ideas. But this talk, which will be over before too much longer, because some of you may not have had dinner. Have you had dinner? I haven't. You had dinner early. Well, I haven't, and so so Mike planned it this way because he doesn't want me to talk too long, and I won't. But hang with me now, because we're now going to talk about solar fuel, the topic of this talk. But I just wanted to give you this introduction to a few of the major points. Now let's get serious. How are we going to split water? Well, all of us in this field, when we ask these questions, we first ask, how did nature do it? Because nature split water. That's what we're living on. We're living on the fact that nature split water and made carbohydrates and oxygen out of plants, which decayed and made oil, gas, and coal. We've been living off nature since the beginning of time. All nature gave it to us. So we've been living off solar water splitting, okay? And just using that material, generating more and more carbon dioxide as we use it, but we don't cycle it. And now we've got to pay back. It's payback time. We've got to figure out how nature did this, and then we've got to build better systems than nature built, because nature's system was built mainly to live and do other things, and the actual energy storage was a small piece of it. Most of the energy from the sunlight that goes into plants is used to synthesize the materials back again and not to store useful energy. Well, here's a diagram of a photosystem 2. It's a cartoon. Gary, there's an expert on this, or several experts in the audience here, and they're wondering why I don't have a higher resolution picture of photosystem 2, and why I'm still putting the manganese complex up here as kind of a sort of a low resolution piece. That's because I don't think the people have really settled down on the exact structure yet. We're getting close, aren't we, Gary? Do you think you know it now? All right, I'll ask for participation later when I show another one, but I'm working up to that. I do know the following, that We need a tyrosine in here. We need something called electron hopping or hole hopping in one direction and tunneling back. There's a whole bunch of rules we've learned from this about what it takes to separate electrons and holes and keep them separated for a long time and preserve the energy. That's another talk. It's a much more technical talk, but I've worked on this field for years myself. So has Mike Wasilewski and many others. We've learned a lot of these lessons, and we're trying to take advantage of them now and building real working solar splitting devices. But you can even start by taking this system and saying, how could we just take chloroplasts out of green leaves and make them work for us? And people have done that. Eli Greenbaum did that at Oak Ridge many years ago. He platinized the chloroplasts. They split water, but they don't last very long. The message about using biological materials is they're very fragile. They're very fragile, and under irradiation, they don't last very long because you're generating singlet oxygen. In the presence of chromophores, it generates then a very, very powerful oxidant called singlet oxygen, which destroys your system. So all of the efforts really to push this have generated very interesting devices, but devices that have the problem of long-term stability. And Tom, we're going to solve that somehow one of these days, working together on it, but it's a work in progress. If you go to the other extreme, and that is the hard inorganic chemist extreme, rather than the biological or biomimical extreme, the hard inorganic, the inorganic chemists are the Marines of chemistry. We go in there and we hit the deck and we solve problems. We figured we could solve this problem many years ago by taking just the opposite strategy, using just metal ions and water. That's the famous cerium system. A lot of great work was done in Israel in the early days of solar conversion on metal ions in aqueous solution, aqueous acidic solutions. You can hit serous ion in aqueous solution with UV light. It'll directly make hydrogen and cerium-4. With an inorganic catalyst, you can get oxygen out. You can cycle this. You can cycle this one forever. It's robust. It's all inorganic. It doesn't ever wear out. There's only one slight problem. It doesn't work on Earth because of that pesky ozone layer that filters out all the UV light. Deep UV light you need to excite the serous ion. Now, we can, of course, all get into spaceships, load them up with cerium, head out to Mars, and we've solved our problem. We could also take all those spray cans, remember, and spray out that pesky ozone layer. I do not advise this. I do not advise this strategy, Tobin. We've got to be smarter. This system is a start, but of course it simply won't work on Earth. We need better light absorption. And you get it from the famous ruthenium Bipi compound, which was the first big advance after cerium in the inorganic world, because this system with bipyridine ligands around ruthenium-2 has a so-called metal ligand charge transfer absorption that makes this compound red, orange, red. It absorbs blue light, and when blue light hits it, it excites the system as a relay system to a platinum catalyst, which makes hydrogen, ruthenium-3, and ruthenium-3 in isolated experiments with ruthenium dioxide makes oxygen. This cycle you can write down. It only works when you do it in pieces. I like to say this cycle works a lot better in the JACS than it does in the lab. All of you young people should realize that a lot of stuff you read in the journals, you better check it out in the lab. This is one of those cases where a lot of stuff in the literature is a little off. Not too far, but you've got to worry about these things. And so this isn't our long-term solution either. But it was a step in the right direction. The ruthenium Bipi system taught us a lot. It was a great advance from the cerium system because it showed us we could use visible light to do these various, and these separate steps with this system do work. It's just hooking them all together to make the whole system work is a problem. And then at NREL. At NREL, in John Turner's lab, comes the really breakthrough in this field, at least from my point of view. At NREL, John Turner built a water-splitting solar cell based on a strategy that I think is very scalable and very doable. It involves interfacing two semiconductors, gallium arsenide with a low band gap to absorb red light, gallium indium phosphide with a higher band gap to absorb blue light. So you get two photons, red and blue. You get two electrons out, and you can reduce hydrogen, protons directly to hydrogen, and holes go over from this semiconductor system, from the valence bands, they go over to a platinum electrode where water is oxidized to oxygen. This system works. This system works with real visible light. It works with over 10% overall efficiency, around 12, 13, 14%, depending on how you look at it, but it's over 10%. It's over 10 times more efficient than natural photosynthesis for fuel formation. That's how good it is. And you have to realize, if you analyze this problem, that about 18% is as good as you can do with devices this right for splitting water. So this achievement of Turner's at NREL, I think, is a milestone in our field. And what's the problem with this? Well, the problem is it can't be scaled up. It involves non-earth abundant materials. It involves toxic materials. It involves arsenic and platinum. This device can't be scaled up. So the goal of the program that I'm working on with a lot of collaborators, including Jim McCusker, who's in the audience, the program I'm working on has as its goal, its principal goal, to build a device this good, but with earth-abundant, hopefully cheap, but definitely earth-abundant, non-toxic materials. So when the time comes, if we build it, we can scale it up to meet demand. And I have put together the following consortium to attack this problem. This is our NSF center, Mike, which we're looking forward to your center and centers like this in collaborative effort to work on this problem. But this is our center. We started at Caltech with these 4 investigators. We coupled in our longtime arch enemies, MIT, because we need them. We need them. Even though they steal our cannons and all kinds of stuff, we need their brains. I hate to admit that. I guess it's on video, so I can't take it back. Please do not show this video to MIT. They do have an extremely ugly logo. That's all I have to offer. They have an ugly, but they're terrific people. And then we put together all these other folks around in all sorts of locations. There's Jim up there. Jim, you're on my chart. You're a good man. And we've got all sorts of people around here. Texas A&M. We've got Marcetta and others there, and Oleg, and we've got places for outreach. Southern University, Cal State LA. We've coupled in energy companies. We've got a coupling with SoCal Edison because we need to couple with the community who really care about power generation, and BP. And we've got an outpost in Switzerland. Here's our device. This is what we're trying to build now. It goes as follows. Its inspiration has come from the NREL cell, from John Turner's work. But this is a sort of a almost millimeter scale device. What we're doing is we're building metal oxide. We used to call them nanorods, but they're much bigger than that. They're 300 or 400 microns in this long dimension, and only 1 or 2 microns radially, because the idea is We want light absorption. This is a very important point. We have to use cheap materials, so materials where you can't transfer electrons and separate electrons in holes very far. So we have to absorb light in the long direction and separate electrons in holes through electric fields radially, just short distances, so we can use cheap materials. And we don't have to use single crystal. This is a design that we think will work with cheap materials. We've got metal oxides with band gaps for blue light up here. We've got silicon down here as our photocathode with the band gaps for red light. We've got a membrane separator. We've got catalysts for water oxidation and catalysts for proton reduction. This is our device. I'm going to show you sort of what early stages of it look like. We're going to make it into what we call solar carpets. And I'll show you the first generation solar carpet in this talk, because we're actually making things. First, for the hydrogen proton catalyst. There, Tom, there's your name. Tom Rauchfuss is in the audience, is a pioneer in this area. Again, the first thing you think about is nature. How did nature do it? How did nature make proton reduction catalysts to make hydrogen? Because nature used earth-abundant materials by definition. And so we always look to nature for inspiration. And these are hydrogenases. Well, if we try to put them on our systems, they're too fragile. Then we could say, well, you could take the stuff out. And the thing is that Tom knows, once you take them out, they don't work as well outside the protein fold as they worked inside the protein. And then you've got to do a lot of work to really tune their potentials and tune their catalytic activities. But that's a challenge that Tom is working on in Marcetta at Ahrensburg. There's a wonderful, wonderful group of scientists working on this problem of taking these biomimetic, these centers, these core centers out of folded proteins and make them work outside just as well as they work inside in a scenario where they will be more stable. And I wish you luck on that, Tom. Our approach is to go away from that and to use catalysts that we can make in large quantities that we did not get inspiration from nature on, but have properties that are appropriate for our things. And we found these cobalt catalysts, these fluoroborated cobalt catalysts that were worked on at Caltech by Zili Hu and Jonas Peters are the ones that we are developing and models of them for our hydrogen catalysts. Zili showed that these operate at very low overpotentials with enormous catalytic hydrogen generations with turnovers that are approaching platinum. And so these are the ones that we're developing. We're working on the mechanism. The resting state is cobalt-2. Electron comes in from an electrode or from some kind of photosystem to make cobalt-1. They're protonated to make what we think is a cobalt-3 hydride. We're not sure of its structure. We know it has this formula at any rate. And then either reacting with itself to split off hydrogen to make cobalt-2 back, or reacting with protons to make cobalt-3, and then coming back through this route are the two possible mechanisms. I'll give you a quick discussion of what we think the mechanism is from our work. What we've been doing is very rapid generation, flash quench generation of this cobalt-1 system with a ruthenium BIPI sensitizer and a methyl viologen relay. We generate cobalt-1 very, very rapidly, and then we can watch it from there. We can generate in a few microseconds, and then we watch it react. We've isolated the products, the cobalt-1 species, so we know what it looks like, and we know how fast it reacts to make the hydride, about 100 microseconds. And from there, it makes hydrogen really fast. Once you make the hydride, the hydrogen following reaction is so fast we have a hard time following it. But we can tell you for sure that it doesn't make cobalt-3, because we cannot, in these transient absorption experiments, very fast experiments, the product coming out after hydrogen is always cobalt-2. The kinetics in our thermodynamic analysis then indicate that that this thing reacts with itself to make split off hydrogen and come right back to cobalt-2, and this pathway is not followed. Why do I say this? I say this, and this is why chemists study mechanism. I've summarized a couple of years of our work here in a couple of minutes just to make the point that we study fundamental mechanisms because we'd like to know how these things work so that we can go to a next round and build a better catalyst. And what we've learned from this is that looks like two cobalt hydrides come together to split off dihydrogen. We figure out then the best thing for us to do is to make a catalyst which is already hooked together to cobalt-2, so when we make the hydrides, they'll spit off hydrogen with much faster rates. And of course, Tom is using the same in his work, the same kind of strategy, because if you look at nature, all of these catalysts in nature that do these reactions involve more than one metal, or most of them do. Most of them involve 2 or 3 or 4 metals for these kinds of reactions. And so, bottom line is, these are the molecules we're making now as the next generation of catalysts. Carolyn Valdez and Jillian Dempsey are stringing together these molecules with different linkers. We've got these already. And we are putting these on silicon surfaces on our photocathode. The silicon micro rods or micro wires are being made in Nate Lewis's lab, and we're putting the cobalts on the sides either by adsorption or by covalent attachment so that we can generate a catalytic photocathode that will, in fact, and we're working on this right now. To show you what these rugs look like, this is what they look like. The Lewis group, this is the group of folks in the Lewis group, they can grow these forests of silicon micro rods off of silicon single crystal, 111 silicon single crystal. You can grow them off up to 300 microns. These are not that far up, but this is what a forest embedded in a polymer looks like. This is what our rugs are going to look like in our device coupled with our catalyst for hydrogen evolution. So we're to the point now of having made, I think, great progress on the hydrogen evolving side of our device. But we've made not that much progress on a membrane that's conducting protons and electrons, and we have a lot of work to do on the photoanode side because the challenge, as Gary well knows, is water oxidation. And so the Lewis group now and some joint students we have are working on tungsten oxide micro rods and decorated in various ways or tuning them in various ways or getting catalysts to go on the surfaces. And again, we go back to nature. Here's my higher resolution picture. Gary, I don't know whether you approve of this or not. This is Jim Barber's picture. Is it okay? It's close enough. Gary has just nodded it's okay, so it's okay, you can video that. This is the Barber thing. Gary is building things with manganese and working on this system, and many people are, and it's terrific work. And we're hoping that things will come out of this that we can actually incorporate in some of our systems. In the meantime, my group has taken a slightly different strategy. We've decided to take copper systems, copper protein systems that reduce oxygen that you can use in fuel cells, that people have built. Fraser Armstrong and several Japanese groups have built working enzyme fuel cells with these copper oxidases that do the 4-electron reduction of oxygen to water. Since we believe in microscopic reversibility and we believe the architectures are built for these 4-electron, 4-proton reactions, Kyle Lancaster and my group is trying to run these reactions backwards and build them into water oxidation catalysts rather than oxygen reduction catalysts. We're working on something called the copper efflux oxidase. We have an E. coli expression system. We can make literally grams, tons, kilograms of this material. It's a thermophilic organism. It's extremely stable. This is stable in boiling water almost. So we've got a protein framework that's very, very stable to work on, and we've engineered this system. We've engineered this system into We've gotten all the cysteines, all the sulfurs out of this site because we don't want any ligands you can oxidize. We've got to have an oxidatively stable. So we've been working very hard to get a hard ligand version of this system. We're very close to it, and because we want to incorporate it, Tom, on a biomodel that we're working on that I can just show here. We've got a program to make a mimic of photosystem 2 by using the fundamental work we have done on electron hopping through tryptophanes. And we've done a lot of work on this fundamental work on using tryptophanes instead of tyrosines to help separate electron and charge over long distances. This is 6 nanometers from here to here. We have a rhenium sensitizer here. We're going to incorporate our copper reflux water splitting catalyst here, and we're attempting to separate electrons and holes through this tryptophane hopping mechanism through 6 nanometers and building this device, which is built around this protein called outer membrane protein A, which we call UMPA, and the real scientists called it UMP-A. But we like UMPA. And we've got an expression system for this. We've built this system. We've got it folded. We've got our sensitizer in there. We're well along to the construction of this biological model of our device. But of course, in our regular inorganic device, we've got to have more robust catalysts. And the message that we've gotten from the manganese center in photosystem 2, which looks like a little piece of manganese oxide, is that for our much more robust device, we're going to use some kind of combination of metal oxides. We've got a number that work now, decorating tungsten oxide micro rods with various kinds of metal oxides, but we have a worldwide search now for the magic metal oxide. And we call this our solar army. We've got kids all over the world, which we've given inkjet printers to print out metal nitrate combinations, because there are thousands and thousands and millions of combinations of metal oxides around. One of them is going to be the right one, and we're not sure which one it is. So in our program, we're searching for quaternary oxides with 3 metals and oxide lasts. We're putting all these kids to work with inkjet printers and laser mindstorm laser scanners and ovens. You inkjet print these and make arrays, heat them up, make metal oxide combinations, laser scan them to image, see if we get any hits. If the kids get hits, put it on the internet, and then we check them again in another location. We get about 3 hits, and we can move these into our research labs to check them out on our micro rods. That's our plan, and this is our first solar army, Jim. This is a group we gathered together, and Mike, you were at this meeting. Many of you were at the meeting in Ventura. This was the pre-meeting and the graduate research seminar. These are all the postdocs and students. A lot of them in our program, a lot of them are in Mike's program and your program, but these are the kids now in the US and other places who are working furiously on this problem, and I thank them for all the work they're doing, and we're spreading out. I've even gotten emails from 4th graders who've heard about this program. They want to get in on it, and they say, "Dear Professor Gray, I'd like to join your solar army." And I'm inundated now, and I'm not sure what to do. But we got to solve this problem. This is a very important thing to get all sorts of young people involved in this enterprise. I really feel that we're going to solve this problem with young people who are energized really to work on this problem all over the world. And in these centers like yours, Mike, I encourage you to get involved with, get some kind of program so that we can recruit really, I'm talking about really young people, and getting them involved in high schools and colleges and all over the place, somehow participating with us in this activity. Because we have to build a base of people who care about this problem. in this country, and I think we can do it by really involving lots of folks. BP, believe it or not, helped us start our program. Big oil company came to us a few years ago and said, you know, we know the future of big energy companies is solar. It's a $10 trillion a year business, so they're naturally interested. And then came money from NSF, Moore Foundation. This is a Stanford program, and IH. My program is not funded by DOE. DOE, I'm very pleased now, is putting lots of money into this. It's a very important step that DOE has made in funding your center and many other centers around this country. It's an extremely important statement that's been made by the Department of Energy. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you on this adventure. Now for a few cars. We got hydrogen cars at Caltech. We're in the PR business. We've converted one of our parking garages to a solar power station, just to show how you can do it. We've got this 700-model BMW, which has a big door in it, which holds 5 kilograms of liquid hydrogen at 23 Kelvin. It's a monster. BMW built this. You might ask, why do we have this BMW 700? Why do we have a more reasonable car? Well, that's because BMW built this car for Jay Leno. And a lot of stars in Hollywood, and they wouldn't drive anything, I think, less than a 700 model BMW. But this thing, well, we drive it around Caltech. And they have me drinking. You can go on YouTube, you can probably see me drinking the exhaust of this. So the exhaust from this is pure water. And so they got this thing saying BMW exhaust. And you can, it's not bad. And then this is our president's wife, Carol Carmichael. We have a terrific president, Jean-Louis Chameau, and his wife, Carol Carmichael. They're both devoted to this cause of ours of renewable energy, and so she has gotten Hollywood people. This is the producer of Little Miss Sunshine. Those of you who saw that movie, Little Miss Sunshine. He comes over to campus, he brings his Honda Clarity. This is the fuel cell car. See, the BMW car is just direct internal combustion engine. It's not very efficient. I mean, it's burned a lot of hydrogen fast. In fact, if you leave it out, the hydrogen just boils off. And so but at least it makes pure water. This is a terrific car which comes over, and so cars are coming out. And I want to leave you, since my time is now up, with the following, my vision for this field. As I said early in my talk, we've been taking from nature since the beginning of time. Photosynthesis from nature has run our planet. It is now time to pay back. It is now time for us to buckle down, get everybody onto the program, get going, and figure out how to make not only fuel from sunlight and seawater, but everything else. Nitrogen fixation, carbon dioxide as the raw material for all carbon materials, and oxygen. These 5 components, of which we can make out of seawater and sunlight, we can make pure water and energy. Think of having power stations, solar power stations next to water purification plants. Just think of that. And there's lots we can do in this, and I think this will be the century of chemistry for this reason, that there will be a time in this century. There'll come a really great time in this century. We can say we just turned it all around. We're paying back now. We have a completely renewable planet. Inputs and outputs balance exactly. We're not doing anything to harm our planet in any way. We're living in a truly renewable society. Thank you very much. Okay.
So I'll open the floor for questions. I'm sure Harry will be happy to answer just about anything you can throw at him.
Let's have questions. None? Yes. Oh, we better get a mic.
No, I have a couple of quick questions. The late Senator Paul Simon was talking about the world's water supply being tapped out, and in absence of cheap desalination, where are we going to get the water from to do this splitting? And the other question I might have is a possible work on another class of materials, namely superconductors. If we can develop a room temperature superconductor, would that not be suitable for both energy storage on a grid and possibly a more efficient conversion?
Yeah, if we have the transmission is a huge problem. The thing that's stopping the big power towers in the desert from being used more is big transmission lines and lost and distant transmission. And the development of superconductors for this will make a huge difference in terms of moving the power around to places where it's needed. I think my vision is that we will have big solar power stations in the Pacific Ocean, and we'll be making liquid fuels. We'll be reducing carbon dioxide to liquid fuels rather than just making hydrogen. And we'll be transporting these liquid fuels on tankers the way we're transporting oil now in tankers. On the question of the water purification, I think there'll be water purification plants along the oceans, and the secondary product will be electricity. The primary product will be clean water from water splitting. The problem we have to solve there is how to run these devices with seawater, because that's not trivial, because seawater has a lot of components, including a lot of metals that plate out on our electrodes. And so figuring out exactly how to run these devices with seawater is going to be a big challenge. But I feel we must do that, because in order to really get clean water, we've got to split seawater and run it through the system, have a secondary electric generating plant, but one of the main things is to have clean water. Clean water problem is at least as big as the energy problem. Exactly right, or maybe Senator Simon was right. Yeah, very important. Others? Yeah.
Harry, can you say something about the thermal splitting of water? Using heat to split water,
yeah.
which that will come also from the sun. What's the state of the art on that?
There's some very interesting systems now to thermally split water. Of course, they're very, very high temperature, but Mark Davis at Caltech is working on this for one, and he's got some very interesting. A lot of people are working on the thermal splitting of water through cycles with catalysts and so forth. And I have a feeling this could be very competitive, and a lot of research, I think, should be invested in this. It's not fashionable to invest in thermal water splitting, I think, now, but I believe we're missing out if we don't invest in that, because I believe it has great potential. And then hybrid schemes where you do maybe the water oxidation thermally and the hydrogen generation photochemically. I think some hybrid schemes for one side thermally and the other side with photons are things that I've actually thought about, coupling together thermal and photochemical water splitting. And we might get better systems that way. So I do believe we should invest in research in thermal solar water splitting. There's been a lot of work in the area, and you can split water that way, definitely. And I think we should think about maybe how we can combine the best features of different kinds of schemes and put together a package. So I'm very much in favor of investing in that. Others? Yes. Tom.
Hey, a question about, actually, since we're in the home of Fred and Ralph Pearson and all these people, that mechanism, what if you want to speculate a little bit more about the DMG reduction, proton reduction mechanism, where you protonate a the Cobalt-1, but you don't make Cobalt-3?
Well, we know we protonate the Cobalt-1, but the spectroscopic properties of our product that makes hydrogen is unlike the standard Cobalt-3 methyl derivatives, which we can make easily and have crystal structures of. You know, you can add methyl iodide or methyl tosylate or methyl anything to our Cobalt-1 species to make the very well characterized Cobalt-3 methyl derivatives. Our protonated Cobalt-1, we're not quite sure what it is, except it's extremely reactive and sure makes hydrogen very nicely. It does the job, and maybe it doesn't get hung up in this Cobalt-3 hydride. We're not sure yet. It may make a Cobalt-3 hydride transit that reacts so fast. We're still struggling with this mechanism, but yeah, if we could isolate this thing, we'd love to isolate this intermediate along the way to hydrogen, but we have not been able to do so. The best we have is a sort of a transient spectrum, and we're working on it. We're not sure what this species is. We were assuming it was a Cobalt-3 hydride all along, and everybody's been assuming that, but it's got some properties that don't seem to agree with that formulation, and so this is an interesting work in progress of what the hydrogen evolving intermediate really is. Yes, the audience is now getting into the act here, realizing that the discussion is better than the talk.
Hello, my name is Matt. I'm an undergraduate here. I'm a sophomore industrial engineer.
You're in the Army.
I am in the Army.
You're in the Army, I got you.
I really am.
I got you.
I'm incredibly interested in solar energy, but unfortunately I'm not a chemist. And
I don't care.
There we go. That was my question.
I don't care what you are.
I want to contribute.
You're going to vote.
I will, yeah.
I'm looking for
I'm from Turkey, so I won't be able to vote.
That's what I'm looking for. That's the whole purpose of this Army. We're going to turn this whole thing around.
My question is that I know you guys are working hard, and I believe rest of the people here, we're not necessarily chemists, but we would like to contribute. I think everyone here is conscious enough to add another brick to this wall, to this army of your vision.
Are you a Northwestern student?
I am a Northwestern student, so my question is...
Mike Wasilewski, where'd he go?
He's hiding there.
There's Mike Wasilewski. They've got a tremendous group of people working on this problem right here at Northwestern University. There's all kinds of things you can probably get involved in.
Perfect.
And if he throws you out of his office,
I'll contact you.
no, just Google CCI Solar.
Okay.
CCI Solar. Google that. You'll be in my network, and we'll put you to work.
Thank you.
But I'm pretty sure Mike will put you to work first. Okay? We need you. In fact, we need non-chemists in a way more than we need chemists. We've got a lot of great chemists. We need to recruit a lot of other folks into our business and help us out with this whole problem. I don't know what you're into, but there's going to be all sorts of aspects of this problem from all fields. Architecture of new buildings, economic analysis, engineers, you name it. This is an enormous enterprise that we're just getting started on. So there'll be several spots for you. There might even be a salary.
Thank you.
I guess you did it. Now we know what your job is. Thank you very much. I think we got to get out of here.